Ama bu defa onları yerle bir etmek için buradayım.
Her şey bitti. Çok geç kaldı bu savaşa. Beni orada The mythical beasts fall. Wildcats roar.
Alles stand in Flammen. Aber jetzt ist die Zeit für Rache.
Na pokrém naspět to roze vědět do značky, jednak tě vrazem níspěj postřela. ¿Quieres demostrar al resto que tú no te brillas?
Karmine Corp have done it. Back to back EU Masters champions.
On vous a manqué. Il est temps de reprendre ce qui nous appartient.
Hello everyone and welcome back to EMEA Masters Semifinals, live from Berlin, Germany. Bonjour à tous. Bonjour, Dagda.
Comment allez-vous?
Happy to be with you. We can do this in French. Ça va très bien et toi?
Oui, oui, c'est bon, c'est bon.
Gullborg, ça va?
Jeg skal ikke være en del af det her.
Oh my god, I'm resisting to French. French Derby today. I'm really happy to be with you guys to talk about this exciting matchup and finding out who's going to be joining Movistar Riders in Montpellier next week. I wasn't with you on the desk yesterday, so let's recap maybe what happened. 3-0! Yet again for Movistar Riders against Matchco Esports. They were undefeated before the game yesterday. GB, you seem to be really...
It was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking. I really wanted Matchco.
They were very defeated by the end of that game.
Watching this yesterday was devastating. And you know why it was devastating? Because Movistar Riders fully deserved this victory as well. They were just outright better. This 3-0 was crazy. But I was just... Oh, Matchco, I had so much hope for them. And in the end, it was a very impressive run out of them to make it this entire way, but goddamn, I would have loved to see them in that arena. But, you know, Movistar Riders, they make it, and, you know, rightfully so.
Yeah, I mean, they looked absolutely insane. It's, you know what's bad with the cast is celebrating the fact that they haven't lost their base yet. That was essentially the highlights for Matchco across that entire series.
Yeah, a few comeback fights, I guess, yeah.
But realistically, I mean, Movistar Riders and Supa in particular were absolutely insane yesterday. The fact the guy even managed to pick up a pentakill yesterday was just nuts.
I mean, it was the Super show, the Super Liga, as you said to GB on Twitter, really good friend here. But mostly, guys, as you mentioned, I think it came down to preparation and the fact that Movistar Riders had more tricks up their sleeve than Matchco, and it felt like they ran out of fuel in this series. Unfortunately, the Italian team dropping similar draft for 3 games and not quite finding the answers they were looking for.
I also just think the game plan, man, VCC was just getting bullied every single game, and everything was about that bot lane. If you weren't the first on it, they would just either get 2v2 killed or then either just actually have Isma down towards that bot lane and make sure that Matchco's bot lane was living in hell.
Yeah, and I mean, Click had an incredible performance, like really shout out to the guy, but there is little you can do against what Movistar were doing. Like every time they were getting into that bot lane, making those massive plays. Yeah. And then by the time, like I think what was it, they were like 7 or 8 kills up pretty much every single time we got to the 14-minute mark. Like it was absurd.
Honestly, props to Matchco Esports. As we highlighted yesterday, this league, the Italian league as a whole, keeps on getting stronger and stronger every year, sending the same representative every time, but still they make it one step further every EMEA Masters representation that they get, so we'll see what the future has in store for them. But yeah, as we said, Movistar Riders advancing to the finals, they look scary.
Yeah, and they look very scary. I love the fact that we've got this hyper-aggressive team in them as well. Like, they're willing to go for kills. They're playing for gold advantages. They want to try and get that bot lane snowballing. Like, they are a very exciting team to watch.
Absolutely, and I think they are really bordering on what's crazy and what's okay to do once they get these leads. Because I've seen them try and go for, 6 minutes into the game, we had your tier, inhibit tower and trying to take fights in the enemy jungle, because that's what we did after we invaded. But they're so exciting to watch. They're so fast-paced. They know what they can go for. And I think once they are feeling themselves, there's no stopping them. And that's the reason why they finally made it to the finals here. And it's been such a while since we've seen a Superliga team made it this far.
I know. I mean, we had Heretics last year, I believe.
Did they not get knocked out to Unicorns of Love, and then it was UOL?
Didn't they win Summer last year?
Oh, last year, right.
And that's why I think it's going to be interesting, because we have Superliga looking really strong, France looking super strong as well. We're going to have this Spain-French rivalry in Montpellier next week, which I'm really happy about. But which is going to be the French team who is going to join them, Team Geo or Karmine Corp. A bit of context here around these two teams. Geo river swept SK Prime, honestly, in an impressive fashion, I believe, in the quarterfinals. And I maybe want to call an upset the win K Corp versus Istanbul Wildcats, as they were considered one of the finalists or potential finalist contestant here.
I think it's just the way groups made people have a different grasp in terms of the strengths of teams coming through. You looked at Karmine Corp, you know, they were obviously struggling against Moscow, but they were also struggling against natives and almost didn't make it to quarterfinals. And I think that made a lot of people not necessarily undervalue them, but I also don't think we saw Karmine Corp at their best as we then saw in a best of 5. But also since we saw the 6-0, that looked easy for Wildcats. In that regard, it looked like they were for sure favorites. And when K-Corp then just came into playoff, they do what they pretty much do every single time. You know, we saw when Reckless was playing with them as well, and they made it to playoffs in EMEA Masters. They did not look like a good team until they hit playoffs. And it kind of felt like that's what happened again, where it's just like, all right, this is an entire different team than what we saw in groups.
And kind of similar to what we saw with Movistar Riders as well, was like, oh, well, they just have more in the tank. They have more opportunities to mix up in their draft. And then you just didn't really have any answer for Wildcats.
Yeah, and when you look at the confrontation we're going to have today, I think it's going to be interesting because Karmine, they worked their way here. In spring, they were bottom 10 in the LFL, having to rebuild the team. New jungler, bringing back Tim Croft is kind of like get back with your ex situation, but bringing Calist in the bot lane, the 16-year-old prodigy, of course, we have as ADC, which is also why they haven't faced off against each other quite often in the LFL versus Team Geo 4 times over the year during the regular season and only 1 time in playoffs in summer. K-Corp is back though, and they look much stronger, I feel, than the time they won EMEA Masters back then. And I feel like for me, when I think of K-Corp, I don't know if it's the French bios perspective, but they established a dominance over the EMEA Masters over the years.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, okay, do you know what the worst finish in EMEA Master K-Corp ever had?
Do you want me to actually give the answer, or do you want to
go on.
first?
Yeah, exactly. The worst they've ever done once they made it here was first place, and that's a bit telling. And they've been here 3 times, all right? So it's a bit telling in terms of how dominant they are when they get here. There's a reason why they look so strong. And once again, coming in as the LFL first seed obviously weighs in a lot in that testimony as well.
Yeah, and given how strongly they crushed the TCL's hope, I feel, in quarterfinals, shows the dominance and what we could expect from this team today. But it's impressive to see that they're bringing almost the exact same roster that brought them success back then, but replacing Maddie with Calist. I don't know, what is your take on this roster and how strong they've been looking so far?
I think they look absolutely incredible. I mean, Calist has been phenomenal in that bottom side of the map. The fact he's hyper-aggressive in the lane, he's able to get the ball rolling for them there. And then as well, just that you've got this really strong synergy between the jungle and support. I love seeing Syncroft and Targamas link up. They'll oftentimes play around Seiken to unlock him, to then double down on the pressure that they've already created in the bot lane. And it just creates this incredibly strong bot side of the map that's so hard to break. And when that starts coming into Dragons and Rift Heralds and everything else, it feels like Karmine Corp just become unstoppable in the team fight.
And it just feels like because of Kalist's introduction to that bot lane, we are starting to see new signs of Targamas as well. Usually beforehand it was with Matty, let me just roam and let Matty do his thing. But with the aggression that Kalist also brings at times, it's like Targamas feels it too and is like, okay, we can try and go for some 2v2s. We can try and look for some bot lane dominance. And it's been really pleasant.
It's also the flexibility that they have. Like,
yeah, exactly.
They're bringing out things like that Senna Neela lane. They're bringing out, like, obviously you see them pop off and things like the Zion, the Kaisa. Like, it feels like they have so much that they can bring into that bottom side of the map. And I think that's what makes this team so exciting to watch, is that, look, you get all your normal picks, but the fact that they've got that flexibility makes it so interesting to watch.
Calist, honestly, I mean, if you just look at the stats here, he's a complete
He's 17!
He just turned 17. That's actually insane. And yeah, given also the stage experience that he got already with the LFL. But let's focus a bit on Team Geo also on the other side, because they made their way through play-in. I didn't think they would go past quarterfinals given the way the 2 first games went. Honestly, it looked like a wrap on this side. But they managed to turn it around, GB.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think really strong performance. Once again, you can see that roster as well. Quite a few players that you might be familiar with as well. You know, obviously Tikui from his way in NA, Jesu as well from the LEC. My favorite part of this roster is by far Ragnar. And I just love what he's been bringing in the top lane for so long. Also when he was playing on LDLC. I think last year as well with how the top lane pool was looking in the LFL, I thought there's 3 top laners that was ready for it. It was Capo, which of course is granted he's been there before, but also Sigenda to go back in there, and then Ragnar is the 3rd one. And I'm really hoping that we can continue to see his improvement, because he is just such a strong player to watch out for.
I will say though, for the quarterfinals, I actually felt like Team Go were the stronger team on the day. Like, even when they lost game 1 and 2, looking back at them, it was like they kind of threw a barn both times, right? They had these early advantages that they weren't able to capitalize, and then they cleaned up for game 3, 4, and 5. So for me, I feel like the reverse sweep has kind of been oversold a bit. I really do think that this team is actually quite strong, especially in those early stages.
I mean, they surely are. They never made it past semifinals, though. So is today the way they could do it? We will see. I was talking to the coach today, Duke, ahead of the game, who was reflecting on the issues for Geo right now, which is usually mid-game, and how to come around fights and get the right setups. And that's something they should be careful against Karmine Corp too.
Absolutely, because I don't think there ever is a question in terms of the individuals on the roster if they can step up to Karmine Corp. They absolutely can. But it comes down to the issues that you're addressing. Go off for sure underdogs, but if they're coming in like having the best day of their life, they certainly can make this a close one. I can easily see this one go to 5 as well, but I think in the most normal scenario, it is just going to be Karmine Corp dominance. I'm really hoping that we're seeing a better sign of them in the mid to late game.
Yeah, they're gonna have to improve on this. We'll touch on what Karmine had to say a bit later, but I want to focus on supports though, because I think it's gonna be a pivotal matchup. As you mentioned, GB, Targamas in the past, giving a bit of room to Maddie and roaming a bit. Is it the same style, and how is it gonna come against Camilius today? How would you separate both play styles?
Yeah, it goes back to a bit what Dagda said as well. It's the flexibility, because we can for sure still see the old thing where he just roams around and then plays for Seiken or plays up towards Cap or in the top side, but it's so interesting in the way that they have now opened themselves up to be a double threat bot lane in terms of we're playing for it with the Nilasena bot lane that Dagda was talking about, but also just in terms of taking charge. You can see it in the forward percentage as well from Targamas. He's not afraid to be ahead in this lane and trying to make the plays. But Camilius as well is an interesting player who pretty much is part of every single thing that Go does.
Yeah, I think that's the big one, is that, like, for me, Camilius has been really good at, like, roaming and trying to set up his mid lane. But the difference for me is, like, Targamas will work with Syncroft, whereas when I look at Camilius, he's not working as much with Linces. Also, I think you've just got a lot more flexibility when it comes to champion pools. Targamas, I think, looks significantly better when he's able to bring out champions that are a bit ranged. Like we saw him pop off in the Senna, when he's on these Enchanter supports. Like, still very good at engage, but can also bring out the range supports. When I look at Camilius, though, when I looked at him bring out the range supports during the course of EMEA Masters, I haven't been as impressed. Like, he was completely mispositioned. I'm blanking at the moment, but I'm pretty sure it's the Milio he mispositioned on in lane the other day, where I was just like, these are just mistakes that you shouldn't be making on these sorts of champions. So at least at the moment, I think the meta suits what Camilius wants to bring to the table, whereas you've got that flexibility with Targamas.
I mean, I remember Targamas when he was playing with G2, bringing a different support every week and just basically completing a challenge. He hasn't quite been doing this with KC since he came back with the team, but nonetheless, I think really impressive. I would be worried on the side of Geo, focusing on the early game, but also maybe they have something to do when it comes to striking top lane. You were mentioning Ragnar previously and what he was able to do. What I was surprised with when it comes to Ragnar this summer is that he was used to serving this carry-oriented kind of champion pool and role with LDLCOL and with Geo in spring, but I don't feel like it's so often the case this summer.
It's for sure been a bit of both at times, but I think it's the flexibility once again that he can bring it out if it comes down to it. But yeah, most of his champions has just been the most played Cassante. We've seen Dion as well, even back on LDLC days when they made it to EMEA Masters, they came up with a formula that was very genius. Hear me out. First pick on. And that's what they did with Ragnar then, which was phenomenal. But he also got a different champion pool. He's been playing Urgot at this tournament. He's been playing Yone in LFL. And sometimes you'll see a Yone ban come out against him. That's not against the Kui. That's against Ragnar in the top side, which is crazy. And you can see it as well. He's a guy that loves to take charge of that top lane. The forward percentage, almost 50%, always gets a lead for himself. And just very versatile in terms of what he brings to a lane, in terms of what he picked, but also what he picks for the team, which makes him so much more scary already from draft.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the big one here, especially as we're coming in and looking at Karmine Corp. Over the course of the last series, it was, hey, we're going to go towards the Oran, the Sion, we're going to go for the full tanks. It feels like Ragnar is someone who can very much punish that style. And if you are, well, if you're going to go for it, versus, oh, well, I can also just match it if we need to and go for these big team fights. But I think a huge amount of this, as we say, is going to come down to that early stages of trying to get control in those early team fights and making sure you're able to set yourself up for success. So chances are we'll see him go back towards those tankier Cassantes and that.
I really want to see if Cabo is going to bring one of these wacky picks that he brought at the beginning of EMEA Masters, or how the game is going to go for this French derby that's going to start right now. So let's send it over to Trouble and initialize for the guest.
Merci. Of course, that's probably the appropriate way to start this one because it is, as Laura is saying, the French derby. It is Karmine Corp of all teams going against Team Geo. I'm Initialize. That's Trouble. So glad to be back in studio. So glad to be back casting with you.
Absolutely.
I
think last time was also EMEA Masters over in spring. There was no K-Corp back then, man. But they've made such a great resurgence. I love how Lo put it on the desk as well. So it was like, it's like getting back with your ex. You know? Bringing Sinker back, reuniting Targamas with teams, taking still in the team.
3 championships, you know. I'm never going to look at this team the same way again.
There you go.
But yes, of course, we have got to sort of get our minds onto this game and onto this draft. Because, of course, Geo on the blue side first time around. And you did hear a lot of focus there towards what we're kind of expecting out of draft, particularly towards this top lane where there's been both of these players bringing out some interesting things across the tournament. Cabochon more towards attack recently, but Ragnar, as you're hearing, the guy's getting Yone bans of all things thrown at him.
Absolutely, and I remember Ragnar running rampant around the course of the Rift with things like Aatroxes, Renekton's, like all the bruises, you name it, it is. We had a conversation over in the green room, and we were talking about Seiken and how his pool usually gets pins like the Taliyah, the Azir, the LeBlanc get banned instantly against him, and he resorts into something like an Ahri or a Nico sometimes. I'm like, you know what, if he gets pinched enough, we might see his legendary rise, which he dominated 2021 with the OG K-Corp come out. Geo Red did straight off the get-go, rise banned.
And one of those other things on that kind of broader topic of conversation was that, yes, you're seeing some of those bans go towards Seiken, but the rest of the team have such interesting champion pools, at least from what we've seen. But, you know, bring out the Neela Senna of all things towards that bot lane came up to be very, very effective, and it did give a little bit more freedom to Seiken to go towards his comfort because the rest of the team had those other options available. It meant that some of the drafting situations were interesting to keep our eyes on. And I think probably no surprise to see the Tristan and the Maokai ban from Karmine Corp. Now the Azir away from Seiken as well. Again, no real surprise.
I feel like talking a lot about Seiken, a real point of contention was his Taliyah as well. And in general, Taliyah all across LFL, we saw it in the BK Rogue series, then Movistar adapted it also to their playstyle. Geo and KC also played that Taliyah. Linza's infamous for also being able to play that Taliyah in the jungle, one of the few carry junglers that we have left over at EMEA Masters. You can also flex it between Tukui and Linza's LeBlanc band. These are the two bands that usually get banned away from Seiken, the LeBlanc and the Azir. There's Rel, there is Taliyah. I feel like this could very well be a Taliyah B1.
Does feel like that, and as you mentioned, right, we know Linces as this player who does like to go towards the Taliyah when he has that option. Of course, Tukui more recently certainly bringing that one up, but that kind of pseudo flex option. But the other one that's kind of been lurking around pretty much every level of play is the Rel. Goes towards the jungle, goes towards the bot lane. Who needs a Taliyah jungle when you can just ride an Iron Horse into the back line?
Absolutely. Now you have a lot of things open that you have to consider, right? The Zeris. Zeri has been also a huge point of contention. We saw it with Supa every time he got his hands on the Zeri. He absolutely rolled over the entire game. You've got the Zalyas, the Rakans, you've got the Taliyah still in there. So it's kind of like a mix and match of what do you want to prioritize. I would say since you've already seen one melee in the likes of Rel, I feel like Taliyah has so much value here already. Any more engage that will come their way from a melee champion, Taliyah can negate that.
And again, this is not the Taliyah B1 first pick, but it is the Swift Taliyah Zeri 1-2 on the red side, which again, I don't think should surprise people. What I will say is perhaps a little bit surprising in some way for Karmine Corp because they've been pretty willing to counterpick the Zeri, right? They were the ones who came up with that Neela Senna lane to kind of take down the Zeri Alistar in pretty stylish fashion.
You know how they say if you can't beat them, join them? It's like if you can beat them,
you can also join them.
You can also join them.
We can do it both ways, exactly. I mean, that was the old SKT thing where it's like, used to beat people with their own champions and then just mentally break them way back in season 3.
But we're better at meta anyway, so
yeah,
we'll beat you with that too.
Exactly, beat you both ways. It's kind of pretty galling when that happens. Certainly a statement to be made, perhaps. On the other side, though, I don't think Azaya is entirely a surprise there for Jazu. Certainly put enough time into that one. Ooh. And of course, the Ivern is something I know Namero is saying, look, just ban it if you don't play against it because it's such a weird champion. If you play the champion, Linces certainly does, it warps the game so heavily.
It's been plaguing a little bit the LEC as well. I feel like a lot of teams sort of, it sneaks under their nose and then it becomes a problem game 1 and then game 2 they have an answer to it, sort of ish, it doesn't work, so game 3 they have to ban it.
Yeah.
So I feel like for KC, it's like, again, if you can beat them, join them. I feel like KC are feeling confident. They knew that the Ivern was one of the top picks when it comes to GO and what they preferably play in the jungle. It also works wonders with things like maybe an AD mid, or maybe you mentioned Ragnar's Yone over in the top lane. So anything that is AD, consistent damage heavy, Ivern does wonders for.
And again, this time around, we are seeing Cabochon given a little bit more freedom here in terms of that potential for that counter pick, as you're saying, because he is into Ragnar.
Don't worry, man. It's...
Exactly. exactly. But it's just making sure that, like, if we are going to look towards this, maybe we make sure it's not going to be an absolutely unplayable top side of the map, because Ornn, bless his heart, is great in a team fight, but can be punished early if you set up a draft for it.
Absolutely, and I feel like already from the start of KC, you do have a bunch of engage options. You have things like the wall. I feel like yesterday Movistar Riders also used that to perfection. They locked in Gnar in the top lane. You put the Thalia wall down. Suddenly Gnar has yet more terrain to stun you onto with the Mega Gnar. So there's a bunch of possibilities right there. You have the R5 from the start of KC. I feel something like, I was about to say Sejuani for Synchro would be great.
Well, it would be great, you're right.
He likes to be the facilitator.
Gio, agree with you.
I've heard that one of the very few counters to Ivan is Nunu.
Is a pair of shears.
It's Nunu because you can eat the Daisy. So you take that part of it. You literally take his ultimate out
Pushing
of
up
the
the
picture.
daisies, quite
Exactly.
literally. Yeah, nice. I mean, I kind of see that angle as well, because the problem with an Ivan, right, is you bring a 6th man like Daisy, particularly as you get later on in the game, is effectively a frontliner. It's just this extra body that can be so difficult to deal with. But they're not going to give Cabochard the counter pick, because they're just going to blind pick the Renekton and say this will be able to play the whatever lane comes towards it.
Renekton into Ivan, Rel, Xayah. It feels a little bit weird.
That Croc could be a lot of pairs of shoes by the time the game is done.
You can't really reach the backline that easily, and I feel like, as you can see from Ragnar, he can play pretty much everything from the bruisers to the fighters to the tanks. I feel like a tank right here makes so much sense. You have so much control over the team fights, and honestly, again, Tukui on his legendary Orianna as well.
He's got ball delivery with the Rel, so you're kind of feeling pretty happy.
I feel like Gio are putting all their eggs into Jesus' basket, onto that Xayah. He's got an extra button on his ultimate to stay safe over in the backline. I feel like, I don't know if I like Camilius and an Ornn right here, because there are so many...
on the Ornn.
Sorry.
That would be cool. I'd be down for that.
I don't know if I'm happy with Ragnar on the Ornn right here, because they already have a lot of tools and a lot of survivability in their kit. But hey, Jesus can carry this. He has so much support right here. And we'll see what Casey will find to break him, because, okay, Javan locked in. A lot of early action could come in from Synchro. Now, a little bit of a tale of the princess right here with Javan and Xayah. It's like, oh, Xayah, mobile lady carry. Javan can jump her at any point. Yeah, she can also lock you into your ult yourself and one-shot you with everyone around. You jump onto your Xayah, you're jumping pretty much alone.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of one of those things that, like, Xayah has always been one of those champs, particularly with a bit of support, that deals with dives so well. It's just in the kit. The feathers are fantastic at dealing with that. I'm looking at a Nautilus and a Thalia and a Zeri and a Javan, and you're kind of going down this list of champions that kind of have that ability to jump forwards, at least to an extent, and want to kind of run forwards to an extent. And you're doing that into a Xayah with the shields and the Rel and the Ivan. That's gonna be hard work.
I feel like Kalist is looking over on the other side of the draft, and he was like, yeah, I wish I was that Xayah and I had 4 support players that can engage, disengage, protect me, shield me twice, create a bunch of control with the ball around me. But on the other hand side, K-Corp wouldn't be K-Corp if they weren't skill checking their opponents. And right now they're skill checking. Javan needs to make things happen over in the early game, or he falls off later on and he's just a pure ultimate. Renekton needs to snowball the top side of the map, or it's going to be extremely difficult to reach the backline for the Orianna and the Xayah later on. As for Kalist, I think he's the only one kind of chilling right now, because we see what Zeri can do like 30 or 40 minutes in.
I mean, let's also be real. This is Kalist, right? He has been one of the breakout stars of the tournament. This guy turned 17, like, what, a few days ago?
A few days ago.
Which is remarkable, really.
Before his quarterfinal,
exactly, like the day before his quarterfinal, he turned 17. You know, just a week or so into being 17, he could be heading towards the finals, could be heading towards Montpellier, and he has been such a superstar. I remember bringing up some of those stats earlier on in the tournament where he was like, look, up 1.5, 1.7k early on in the game at 14 in remarkable fashion. And we'll see whether, of course, he can pull that off again here. He's certainly going to be asked to do so in this game. As we've also said, not the easiest to do that into some of these comps.
Yeah, and also let's give a little bit of a backstory from Gio, because they are a team that came through the play-ins. And over in the LFL, they kind of flopped, you know, they brought all the names, Vitality V2 over in the LEC, but in the LFL, and they didn't make it very far. They made it all the way to 3rd, but look at them now, toe-to-toe with the LFL champions, and they could take them down right here themselves and move all the way to the finals in Montpellier. So a great development over time. Looked lost over in the LFL. The development speaks for itself over here.
It's remarkable, really, isn't it? And of course, Gio had a slightly rougher time getting to semi-finals than Karmine Corp did, though ironically, probably the other way around in groups, where Karmine Corp struggled to get through to the quarterfinals in some ways. It got a little bit rough at some points, and they had to fight their way forwards from that 3-3 tiebreaker. but did manage to do so well. And again, their quarterfinal was phenomenal. Geo, it was a Game 5 where an Elder Steel had to come on through from Linces. And yes, Dagda said, look, the reverse sweep is perhaps a little overstated because even in the games they lost, they were certainly competitive and had some Baron throws that happened. But the point is, it wasn't a clean semis either way, and I'm sure they'll be looking to right the wrongs here in this second game.
I feel like I'm a little bit on the verge with Team GO because I look at the team fights and I'm like, oh my god, they're the best team in the league. And then I look at the next team and I'm like, what in the world is happening? This is so miscoordinated. But of course, playing against KC,
Go for the level 1, that's actually the early clear from Callisto. Just gone, he's dead! First blood happens and it's going to Jezu!
Absolutely marvelous right here from the duo over in the bot lane. I feel like KC disrespected that level 2 coming out from the Rel and the Zaya that got jumped on experience. And honestly, I feel like this is a huge whoopsie from the KC bot side. You know they're about to hit level 2. The cleanse came through, but it was way too late. You get ignited. And Kalista ends up going down without a fight.
Targamas was expecting that one more step forward from Jezu, just stops and autos, and so the dredge line on the other side goes wide, and the damage onto the AD carry wasn't stopped. Kalista goes down, and this is a player who we have had nothing but praise for across this tournament. Jezu on the other side and Camilius have often been left out a little bit to dry sometimes. We've noted that they have often been forced away from towers when the rest of the enemy teams start to converge on them, and they've often been forced to play a little bit weaker side than perhaps they'd like. This time around, though, there is no interference from the other team. They just get a 2v2 kill, and it's a really good start early on to the game for Team GO.
Absolutely, taking the reins in their own hands, right? They're playing towards that 2v2, and now Seeker's job becomes a little bit weird right now because there's a level 4 Ivern roaming around with Camilius level 2, so it's so difficult to play around your jungle, play around these early ganks, especially since your bot lane has fallen. Now they need to play extra careful. You do not have the cleanse over in the bot lane, and as you can see, Jeju didn't necessarily need to burn his flash right there, so Java towards the bot side of the map couldn't necessarily bring you much at this point. As you can see, Syncroft towards the top side of the map, he's gonna take the Scuttle Crab, potentially look for a pick-off onto Tukui. Doesn't have much mana over in the mid lane. He's trying to crush his wave in. Seiken, though, extremely low on HP. I don't know if they're going to try anything.
I think it might be a little bit bold, I agree. And Ragnar, yes, low on mana, but should be okay here as it stands. And it's just what you expect perhaps from Renekton early on, getting the shove and having an okay time in these opening levels against the Ornn, as is kind of standard now over a few years of seeing that particular matchup.
Now, we saw 2 different Karmine Corps, right? A different one in groups and a different one over in the quarterfinals. I feel like over in groups, we saw a Karmine Corp which was a little bit hesitant, I would say, a little bit lazy, if you allow me, in the very early game, to the point where Matchko took a lot of advantage of that, stuck their dragons and beat them. And right here, I feel like they're doing the same. Their early game looks a little bit lazy, not a lot of cover, losing over in the 2v2, which is usually... The bot lane is usually what's the weakness for Geo, the fact that they get alone, as you mentioned earlier on. But right now they're doing great.
Yeah, it does feel like they've had a really good start to this game, as we've kind of been saying. But otherwise, things have kind of slowed down out of that early fracas into the bot side. It's a slight early lead to Geo off that kill, but everything else has kind of been left much for muchness. Yes, there's the slight lead for the Renekton top side, but otherwise, all of these lanes playing out pretty much as you expect. There's not been too much craziness as yet, but then again, we're only 5 minutes in.
I feel like the craziness will come when Seiken is his level 6.
I completely agree, yes.
Ornn is quite diveable, only has 2 Ruby Crystals in his inventory, which means, yes, that's a lot of HP, but there's not a lot of defenses, which means a champion like Talia can pop you, and a champion like Renekton can finish you off, right? Now, again, Syncroft has just backed, he has the pickaxe in his pocket, his flag and drag actually hurts, plus the passive auto attack from the Javan. So we'll see where he chooses to take that first action on the map. You need to choose wisely, because if you fall onto an Ivern, this is going to go south really quickly. Ivern is so powerful with all his utility in those little skirmishes. That's why this champion is so powerful currently, because he can bail out so many champions. You can get the Rel with the root over in the backline if you hit it. So again, you see, KC, they're grouping up towards that dragon. They're going to start it up. I don't think you're going to commit to this dragon yet. There's 4 members from Geo around.
Yeah, it would be a little bit bold, I kind of agree, but there is a lot of players around here. Doesn't appear to be going towards too much. I think it is just fighting for control of the river, and then Cabochard actually finding a little bit of a wrap around here, maybe looking to see whether Takui oversteps here. Is going to be forced to go back under his tower, but Cabochard will swim his way back towards the top side through the river.
I feel like this is true Cabochard nature right here. The dragon is going to get started, and Geo are looking to sandwich.
Yeah, they are certainly thinking about it. Everyone's over here. Flash on forward, but that's an interrupt on the crash down. Still the route comes on through. Dragon secured though by Synchrof. Now they're flashing away. Targamas desperately low, trying to get out. The flash from Taken, but now Ragnar's down here. He's getting a two-man call on the Forge Guards. Looking to stick them straight into jail. A double kill for Jezu, who is feasting in this early game. Kalist about to fall down as well. 3 kills against the 3-time champions of EMEA Masters. Phenomenal play from Gio in this early game.
I'm so confused. Camo shot, shoves top lane, to roam all the way to mid, to then go top and miss the Ornn walking down the river. The Ornn gets there first and makes it a 5 versus 4. Now KC right here, the sandwich to Kui with the ball, does a great job at zoning out players from KC. Pulls Seiken back as well, allows the rest of Geo to chase them up. And look at that! You thought your top laner was roaming down if you're KC? No, you're wrong. He went back up top to catch the wave. It's Ragnar who's there on the play, makes the 5 versus 4. 3 kills for Geo. Fantastic early game so far.
It is exceptional. And look, we were about to say, look, this is Karmine Corp, who 3-0 the defending champs in Spring, who have this incredible start to the tournament, who are looking to reclaim that dynasty that they kind of defined the kind of the French pride in the LFL, in the ERLs. You can see it here, this graphic, and Geo come out swinging like this. Incredible stuff against a team that is just notorious for not only turning up to this tournament, but dominating it.
Absolutely, and they've done it over in 2022 Spring through play-ins.
Right.
They barely qualified for the tournament, they went through play-ins, and they won the whole damn thing. Geo could do the exact same thing here. We've had so many winners over the years at EMEA Masters that come through play-ins. And yes, Geo weren't the strongest in the LFL. Targamas is not the strongest on the map either.
No, he did get to Spider-Man, so should have that Dredge sign up and available shortly as Seiken will throw some people away, but not for the shockwave, drags him straight back under. Targamas needs that diving suit because he is drowning again.
KC look a little lost, I would say, in this early game.
Yes. Yes. I mean, like, what do you need to say? They really do.
I'm just so confused because I'm looking at the Ivan and I'm like, Ivan is a huge problem. Ivan has always been a huge problem over in EU, you know, and there hasn't necessarily been a pick or a play style that counters it very easily. There's only very few champions that can go toe-to-toe with him, and usually the junglers are stuck on that facilitated kind of champion and they can't really branch out of it to counter the Ivan, so he kind of goes unanswered. And right here, I feel like ever since that 2v2 down in the bot lane, Linces has been able to do whatever the heck he wants onto the map. He walks up, pops a shield, pops a root, and then the rest of the team follows because currently they are stronger. Look on the bottom of the map, 3-0-1 for Jezu. Kraken Slayer already secured. No one's even tanky enough to tank that true damage coming through.
I think that's something that Team Geo has always had, right? It's just the raw star power of their players. You look at Ragnar and Takui and Jezu and Camillus and even Linces, who both me and you know very well from his real superstar split last year over in the NLC, where he was pulling out the likes of Diana and crushing people on it. He's on a more supportive style, but we've always known he's a flexible player. And, you know, in theory, this should have been an LFL super team, and Geo haven't quite clicked in the way they were hoping for regionally, as much as they might have once hoped to.
Cabo.
Cabo Shard does start to go for the all-in. It'll be an ult for an ult trade. Cabo does get it on the return end. Call of the Forge got too much more to be found, but what I was about to say is, like, we have had questions about Geo. The furthest they've made as a semis, they were supposed to be one of the incredible teams, and maybe this is an opportunity for them to prove that all those earlier woes in the split can be outwritten if you just win the damn tournament. If you prove you have it at the end of the year.
Development speaks miles for a team, right? And coming through play-ins, you've got the extra games up your belt too, which helps you develop versus opponents that you find at EMEA Masters, not necessarily regionally, right? Against all regions across the EMEA. So coming back into a more regional sort of rivalry, if you will, with KC, you know these guys, you know how they're playing. You've had time to study them while you're developing your own team. And the fact that Geo went third, didn't do great in the LFL, and now are coming toe-to-toe with the LFL champions and three-peat EMEA Masters champions speaks miles. The fact that the early game was one of the weakest points over the course of EMEA Masters, and now they're winning against KC over in the early game also speaks miles.
And again, Karmine Corp are hardly a slouch in the early game. Kalist in particular, as we've been saying, has been putting up some very, very impressive early game stats along with the rest of his team. And Geo have come out swinging bright and early. It's early 2v2 kills, it's early jungle kills, helping out get more kills on that bot side as well. And most of that has gone into a very auspicious place in Jezu, who as we said, was always going to be hard to get onto with this Xayah with all these kind of shields and frontliners in front of them.
This is worrying me, you know?
Right, exactly. How did Karmine Corp kill the Xayah,
This
realistically?
Is worrying me because Geo outscales, in any case, KC. You've got so much power in the Orianna and the Xayah, so much frontline, so much utility, that Zamba's going to have to seriously misstep. Cabo's going to have to bump his ult just to clear that wave and not get dived. He's going to get dived anyway!
Oh boy, who needs a wave when you can just do this? Chameleon's tanks the tower, who gets flashed on! Caboshard will not let that one go freely. It's a 1-for-1, but he still dies.
Oh my god, the Zoo right there. Heart of ice. That press flash doesn't ghost at all. He knows he has just enough HP to survive that tower, and honestly...
I would have flashed.
That's why you're here.
I'm not very good at the game, however.
But that's great stuff. Again, 3-0-2 for Jez over in the bot lane. Let's look at this again. Caboshard pops the ultimate, gets that range bar up, but he uses his Q, which means he doesn't have the heal available for himself. He'll flash to get the W, but once he's getting ignited, that Q does not heal much when he hits with full rage. So he ends up going down. A good trade for Cabo because he gets that first kill for KC. But on the other hand side, the objective for GO was to push that bot lane tower, and they did.
He did, and in fairness, the gold is back to pretty close right now. The first tower went the way of Karmine Corp. This Renekton is up over 1,000 gold, so feeling pretty happy about that. But as we said, look, you're into a very heavy scaling comp, a very heavy 5v5 comp. But it's not like Karmine Corp don't have decent Amid options in the mid game, and you know, the Zeri will scale very well. It's just one of those compositional questions you have to ask, and we wanted to see Karmine Corp that little further ahead. That second dragon being denied as well, as Geo claimed their first of the game, also kind of hurts that a little bit as well, as Kalist just about okay here. You began to wonder for a second.
I feel like also the composition that they build around that Drell first pick from the set of Geo makes so much sense, right? Because we said that Talia is going to make it difficult for NA melee to walk up, to create more engages together with Drell, but you don't have to. Look at all the unconditional, non-committal, engages you have. The Ornhorn, the Q from the Ivern. You've got Orianna Shockwave as well if you want to. You've got Feathers coming in from Xayah. You've got so many non-committal sort of CCs and engages coming in from Geo that you don't have to walk up to Talia.
And you've also got pretty good like counter engage, right? Like you dive too deep and you're in prime position to get shockwaved in return, to have a Call of the Forge come on you, to have that Magnet Storm come down on you. So if you stick a Cataclysm down in the wrong place, or Targamas dredges lines in a little too deep, the possibility of turning it around and having some of those counter engages sucker punch you really hard can get pretty rough too.
Absolutely. Now I have a real question. Is that basketball, Daisy?
It is.
Great.
I know it's a reference to a very famous NBA player, but my knowledge of the NBA is next to nothing. Like, I could probably mention something about Kobe or Shaq or LeBron. That's kind of it.
I know Antetokounmpo, and that's because he's Greek, so...
Oh, fair. You know, I didn't even know who that was, so that's...
Wow.
I'm sorry, I'm not Greek enough.
He's got a bunch of MVPs, okay?
Very true. In fairness, as I said, my knowledge of NBA is very limited. Give me a rugby question, I might do a little better.
I'll try you next time on trivia.
That's setting me up for like some seriously embarrassing statements, so I'm prepared to embarrass myself for the entertainment of the masses. Again, it's part of the job, I guess.
Now, part of Javan's job back
Yes.
into the game is to create those early game leads. Now, KC have found themselves in a very tiny gold lead, if you will. It's even leading towards them just a little bit, but I think this is mainly because Geo don't have to do anything. They've got that one dragon, they can chill back, they can push in their waves. KC have to force fights onto Geo for KC to win, and Geo are just throwing their hands up and say, it's fine, hashtag we scale.
Part of it as well is you need to look at where that gold's been broken down, because the gold lead is in a Jarvan and a Renekton, who, it's fine, that's not a bad place to have it in the early game, but I'm looking at the other side and seeing a Xayah and an Orianna that are ahead of the curve, and that's a bit scary.
Now, look at Synchro's positioning. He's over on the flank. Caboshard's coming from the top side. Targamas from the bot together with Kalist and Seiken. That's a 3-man flank. A 3-man flank is not a flank.
It's not. Synchro, I think, is still off vision, though. He can find a really good flank angle. Look for it. Doesn't get as much value as he's hoping for. Now the shockwave comes on through. That's the counter engage we were worried about. Synchro taken low but not out. No one is dead. Caboshard popped the Dominus, didn't get a huge amount of value. And instead we go right back to the Herald. And Synchro, yes, was off vision. Yes, found the flank. It just wasn't enough. And I'm looking at your face. You're so frustrated.
A 3-man flank. It's not a flank. One person is flank. Actually, it was a 4-man flank. We had the 2 carries coming through that mid lane river. We had Targamas coming through the ramp of the top side. We had Synchro over on the left side of the screen, and Caboshard over on the top. You're giving Geo what they want. They can pick and single out any champion and take them down, and that's exactly what they did with Synchro. Who's gonna bunch up onto this ramp, onto this choke point, when there's Orianna, Ball, and Feathers? No one. They can't follow up Synchroth over there. Geo singled him out, took him down, and took what they came for, the Shelly.
And, you know, again, we're starting to see some of the issues of, like, yes, you can get into the backside, but how easy?
So alone.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, unless you layer up Targamas and Cabochard flashing on in, finding a really good dredge line at the same time, it's going to be hard work, and you've got to kind of navigate, particularly for Targamas, your way past the Daisy and the Ornn and the Ivan and the Rel. That's pretty hard to thread the needle of that dredge line.
Absolutely, and I feel like what was very impressive of what Movistar did yesterday when they did pick the Renekton and they said, hey, we're going to actually play through topside, is that they actually did. That 1.3k that Cabochard has accumulated himself is not going to carry them much longer towards the late game. Renekton is a mid-game sort of oriented champion that loves to play around these choke points and these early objectives that go down. The further the game goes, Renekton's going to find it really difficult to find an opening, to find an angle to get into this backline to one-shot these players. And right now, they just haven't helped him enough in that early game to make this possible for him.
And again, it is worth noting that the gold lead is still pretty close. It's just kind of the, as we've been saying, it's where that gold's gone that's been a bit more concerning. Herald's coming down in mid lane, and now that mid lane tower going down, especially 20 seconds on until an Infernal Dragon spawning, is pretty good news if you're a Team Geo fan. And I'm looking at 2 kills on an Orianna, 3 kills on a Xayah, and good positioning on the map to set up for that. Drake, you're feeling pretty okay about your game state right
I think that's beautiful timing. I don't think Cabochard should TP into this fight right here. I think you should focus on pressuring more towards the side lanes. The more towers you get, the more global gold you're going to give to your team, the more you're going to open up the map for your team. And KC really need this right now. They cannot contest 5 versus 5, so pressure towards the side lanes all they can. You see, they're going to actually rotate Khalees towards the bot side of the map as well to take that tower down. And they have 2 more Dragons time to go until they have to fight. So in around 10 minutes, that's the timeline that KC have if they want to try and turn this game around. But by that time, they'll be close to 30 minutes with the Xayah on 2 to 3 items. A lot of the defensive items, or supportive items, would have completed by then onto the Ivan too. So it only becomes a lot more difficult to break.
Cabochard, though, did claim that second turret. It's on his most played champion of all time. As a champion he's found a lot of success on over the years. He's got 2 items. He is now in a position to try and make some of, I say on the cast, kind of eat our words a little bit and prove that the Renekton is still going to find extreme value if Karmine Corp are going to look to come back in this game just a little bit in terms of where they're at in the game state. Look, they've got the gold lead normally in that top side. They've got a lot of these turrets early on, and that's good news. But as we said, Jezu is still leading the game in terms of the gold. It's in scary positions. You're still kind of down that dragon, and that's still not an easy thing to be facing down as a Karmine Corp player.
Yeah, I feel like KC are now going to chill back a little bit. They do have, again, another 10 minutes to try and figure out a way they want to break the game. Because to win on a fair 5v5, you forget about that. You're never going to win on a fair 5v5. Unless, I don't know, Khalees puts on a cape and a mask and he pretends he's Batman for a day and he just carries the whole team fight. I don't think it's possible in this particular composition. So I feel like
Zeri, I don't know. I've seen some crazy things happen.
You have to somehow play through Cabochard. You see how Tukui is overextended over in the side lane. Yes, he has Camilleus with right now, but with the right vision, you can potentially spot people who are covering Tukui or whoever's in the side lane and pick onto them. You need something to start happening on the map. I feel like KC are not pressing the gas pedal at all here, and they're going to fall into the trap that Geo made for them over in Picks and Bats.
It's worth noting, of course, with the likes of the Nautilus and the Talia and the Jarvan, your ability to jump onto an isolated member on a side lane is actually really strong. So if you can make that happen away from a 5v5, especially if you can find a pick onto, God forbid, Linsus if you're a Geo fan, then maybe that kind of early Baron take might be a possibility if you can snipe off a key member like that. Still, that's easier said than done, but a moment like this might not be a bad one, as Ragnar loses about 20% of HP. Yeah, it's not bad. Of course, still onto an Ornn, not the most easy target to kill outright with a combo like that.
That Geo are going to fall into fog of war. They're just managing the waves. Again, they have to do nothing. Every single fight that Geo has won, KC initiated, because KC need to be the aggressors here. Daisy's going to be popped and the Baron's going to start. I think this is a bait for KC to engage on them. Geo is baiting for a team fight right now. Bot lane, Seiken down there. They're baiting his teleport. Let's see who's going to pull it.
see if they can make it happen. They want this fight to happen. They want the 5v5. Smelling a little bit like a burger flip in the bot side. Seiken taking away a tier 2. They are playing this map 1. This is going to be a trying to seal. It's still going to be secured though by the side of Geo, but the flip came on through. They win the burgers though, and they're going to be eating good right now as Seiken teleports in the media, has to flash. Karmine on the backside is being zoned up by Ragnar. Syncron just about gets out, but wait! And Kalist begins to free fire. Maybe we've been on it the wrong way all along, and Karmine Corp can still win the 5v5. They get 2 kills, but lose the Baron.
Ooh, Geo got a little bit complacent right there. Yes. They were fighting before they had key items coming through. You just saw Ornn just completed his Radiant as well. You needed these sort of items to make this Baron play happen, because KC are playing you on even gold. Look at that. Synchro jumps into the pit. He takes a lot of the targets on himself, but look at Seiken and Targamas, how they're guarding Kalist onto the side. Seiken threatening from mid, and Kalist gets to free fire once that Cataclysm goes down and traps 2 people in it. The rest of Geo have to bail because the team fight got split apart.
And we were worried about the 5v5. We said, look, this is going to be tricky.
That worked.
Karmine Corp, and they made it work. They got Jezu, who, yes, stepped
broke the game.
But they got it. I mean, the problem is they are still down the Baron, and that could be problematic with so many turrets up and standing, all of them. And if you can get a decent shove in here with that Phalanx up, then you can start to recoup some of that gold you kind of lost out there in the fight a little bit. On a Kabashov would be a bad start. Who has to dominate, begin to trade back, but Sterak's pop, still trying to run away. The blue trinket comes out. Just keep an eye on the tug. Will flash on forwards for that root caller. Get the trick on in and gets the kill. But now Ragnar on the other side is being jumped on. Flashes out of the Cataclysm and just about survives. Manages to Bellow's Breath, the knock-up from the flag and drag. And the Ornn survives.
That speed up right there from the Orianna ball did wonders for Ragnar to get out. Ultimately, it's a 1 versus 0. Cabochard ends up going down, and mind you, this is the richest person on the side of KC. 3,000 gold up his counterpart in the likes of Ragnar. This Renekton is worth some gold, and tanking him off the map for many seconds means that KC are extremely weak. One of the reasons they won that team fight that we saw earlier was because Cabochard found his access into the backline, and he's a big crocodile currently. So having him off the map gives a lot of freedom to Geo to push out their waves and reevaluate how they want to play the team fights. Because we said KC need to break the game, and they did. Right now, with Geo not having set up for this Dragon while they had the chance and the resets, puts them behind on the vision game.
Look at Kalist as well. He's caught up with the likes of Jezu, who was the richest man of the game not so long ago. He hit 3 items just before Jezu did it, no less, which is an incredible recovery. Those 2 kills did a lot of work to bring this Zeri right online in this game, and if there was ever a game for Kalist to prove exactly how good he is, this would be one of them. Milius is on vision, but not for long, and the dregs of this Baron will be used to shove on into the mid lane and finally get Geo a second turret. They get on through, try and get some more value. Into the tier 2, they come into the backside. Camilius deletes Kalist. I apologize, I think that counts as a cast a curse. Now Targamas trying to flash away. Can't get far enough. The dredge line is just not going to drag him to safety. A double kill to Jezu on the Zyre, and the shove can continue.
Camilius, what an absolute beast. Sees the angle, Hex flashes over the wall. Geo can look to end. You have 20 seconds on Kalist and Targamas. Of course, the right play would be not to try and push your lag right here, because there's a lot of teams that EMEA Master have lost by over pushing, and you do have Cabochard behind you that's gonna stop your wave if you try to push further. So great stuff right there. 24 minutes in, you take the inhibitor. The inhibitor is still gonna be down 2.5 minutes until the next Baron comes up, so they can use it as a point of pressure on the map, together with another side lane to try and lure KC into another Baron fight.
Trying to lure themselves onto Synchro would be a good start, who face checks, has to throw down the Cataclysm, but the only end of days is his own. Lincers gets down the Redemption, will heal right back up, and all that damage that was done means very little at all.
That champion is disgusting.
Isn't it just? Shirelia's Redemption stopwatch an additional team member in Daisy.
You know what's the funniest thing? It's the silliest champions that get hated the most.
Oh yeah.
Look at him. He's minding his own business. He's got really wiggly long legs. He looks like he's having a lot of fun when he's walking around the jungle, but he makes your day miserable.
I think the real skin is the Coven one, like the Elder God one, because I think there is something
That's the reality
evil.
of it.
Underneath there's this evil monstrosity of the forest.
This is the reality of Ivan in that skin.
Yeah. But playing too much Baldur's Gate, it's a hag, I'm telling you. Yeah, that facade, it's all a lie. There's something evil underneath it.
Now again, even though this game has looked very Geo favored from the very beginning, KC found themselves in the lead. They fell back down. Now it's back to even. And again, don't necessarily fool yourselves too much. Geo are scaling above gods right here. And KC have always found their way around Cabo Shot to 10 things around. Can Cabo turn this one around?
Everyone's coming. There's going to be a Baron in under a minute, so this would be a pretty important pick. Throws down the ultimate, will get shockwaved into a crash down. A little bit of Pharomancy locking the Crocodile down. And he is dead to rights. Third death of the game. He'll pick up a GA now, but he's dead for 45 seconds. He doesn't have teleport. He's not going to be there when Baron spawns.
That was 5 members that were pulled down bot lane. I don't know if that was actually necessary because Kalista is going to get a tier 2 for free for the side of KC. And not only did Cabo Shard win them a bunch of time, he gave them a tier 2 mid, which makes the map dark for the side of GO. They've already established a ton of vision from the side of KC towards the top side of the map, which is the side of interest with 18 seconds onto the Baron. And KC can actually have time to push in their waves before GO react, set down their vision, go back and buy even more. I feel like what happened to Cabo Shard right there was best case scenario for KC.
Some ways. Gonna have to see whether they can buy enough time, because there will be that slight delay between Cabo Shard's spawn and his entrance into a position to impact the map. Baron alive, Cabo Shard alive, now coming out of base, and will Geo try and rush this before the Crocodile gets here? Doesn't look like they're feeling that confident. That ward in the back, as you said, will spot out Geo attempting the bait.
Who is going to be on the side? He would get caught here, Kalis.
Or the Forge God goes across a couple, and Targamas is just eviscerated. Desiccated in there, and he is dried up and left out to dry. Kalist trying to run away, will spark surge over the wall. Syncroft on the flank, looking to get back in, but a pull back and a pull down onto Seiken, who is dead. And now with 2 members dead, they will turn back towards the Baron.
I mean, initially, we're almost 30 minutes in, 4 items onto Jizu. You've got 3 items onto your Orianna. The rest of the guys just need to push the trigger to engage, and they did just that. GO are just that much better when it comes to team fighting with their current composition. You cannot just face check them, you cannot just walk into them, especially 4 versus 5, because you're gonna pay the price. KC were to split. Cabo Shard has just joined them. Kalist is over in the mid lane, so they find Targamas, they burn him down. He's just a support, doesn't have a lot of defenses at this point. And then they just walk them down. The speed up's coming through. Jezu goes into chase. This is Geo's start to finish.
And, you know, we have to give credit for Karmine Corp for early on in the game getting gold by playing those side lanes so well, by getting those structures that actually brought them to something of a gold lead against perhaps some of the issues we had with the way the early game went in terms of the kills and the map control. But now they've lost a second Baron. Now that they are beginning to
run! KC, run! Get the third dragon, run!
And they do have the possibility to perhaps claim themselves some point. Strubble loses her mind. It's F1 here.
Look, Synchro's got me right there. He's like, I'm sprinting that dragon down.
It's Verstappen just coming out in place of League of Legends. Oh boy.
They got it. Okay.
Got it. There you go. That's actually a minor win there. You take that.
That's great. That's your win condition right there. And Infernal Soul later on could be huge for you, especially since Kalist has so many items on him. And also, let's not forget Seiken, because yes, he's been struggling a little bit on the kill department. He's 0-2 and 2. But you saw what he can do even on the Ornn when he gets to chunk him down just a little bit. Ornn is not invincible at this point. So a little bit more time is what KC need. But on the other hand side, when your opponent team has Baron, time is not something that you can afford to give away. Because you give them time, Geo is gonna take structures. They already took the top lane inhibitor, now they're gonna split. They need somebody in the mid lane to shove in that wave. You see it slowly pushing over in the mid lane. When it actually reaches the point of interest, they're gonna swap over and take that inhibitor as well.
Reminder, they have to get to Jezu, to Karmine Corp, and it's just easier said than done as Geo just pull the trigger. Never mind people going into them, they'll do it straight back onto Karmine Corp, who are looking a little bit redder than the blue wall would like. Blood spilled across the steps of their own base. Inhibitor down, 2 members down in Seiken and Kalist no less. The 2 critical carries are down, and Geo are looking to end the game right here, right now. They will strike first in this LFL derby. They will go up 1-0 against the most dominant team EMEA Masters has ever seen, and they do it in style.
Such a great showcase of dominance down in the bot lane as well. Jezu, of course, it was a fall from the gods, right?
Yeah.
Falling down from the LECs, looking to prove that these 17-year-old so-called rookies ain't got nothing on him. 2v2, the bot lane of KC. together with Camillus. What a fantastic performance. It started from that 2v2. That 2v2 unlocked the Ivern on the map. From there on out, FLICKR could not play the game onto the Javan, because if you face check an Ivern, you die. I don't think the draft was particularly the problem. I feel the Ivern was, though, and I'm expecting to see it banned going forward into this series, because I don't feel like the teams have an answer to it.
And, you know, in the quarterfinals, I gave a lot of credit for Karmine Corp for coming up with some really clever drafts that made things quite difficult for their opposition. This time around, that Ivern felt pretty good. And I do want to give credit to Karmine Corp for playing out a difficult mid game by getting the gold in the side lane, by managing to get some of those towers and still playing the map state as best they could. But the moment it came to those 5v5s, it got increasingly difficult. They got Jezu once, and that was possibly of them stepping a little bit too far forward.
Yeah, they were very split, They broke the game.
Exactly, but that was easier said than done, and I think it'll be a little bit back to the drawing board, a little bit back to being a bit more respectful in the early game, but enough of us being respectful. We're going to be respectfully sending you towards a break, and we'll see you back after that for Game 2 of this series.